when you're thinking about agility, this really enables companies to respond quickly to market changes or like new opportunities, right? Without having to disrupt their internal processes and also not being tied down by the perm process. This is not me coming at the perm process by any means, but I do think that we can all agree that it's definitely a much longer, more in-depth operation from start to finish. Whereas contract recruitment, it's more of a speed to fill, speed to hire mentality. So you're spending a lot less time trying to get someone into that position.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Lex Winship and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make a change. Today we have an amazing trending topics episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show. Sometimes we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space. Other times, like today, we cover trending topics, things that you need to know that are unfolding right now. Every Tuesday, we drop a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that will drive better results in your day-to-day. And occasionally, you'll hear a mic drop episode from Loxo's founder, Matt, where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. And as a reminder, if you like the content that we share here, you can subscribe to see this in your feed every single time you log into your podcast streaming app or video platform. So, without further ado, on this podcast, we have talked a lot about the gig economy, about how freelance labor is really shaping the market as a whole in general, and how that ripples out to influence recruitment. There exists an entire talent pool of candidates made up specifically of career contractors. And while 2024 was a very difficult job market, it seems like things are a bit more promising in 2025 amidst all of the unknowns and unprecedented things that are swirling around out there too. And with the return of more perm jobs, we will also see this same trend, if not more so, with contract positions. So with all of that in mind, we thought it was time to start talking about how recruiters can prepare and take advantage of this movement. So we're starting a 3-part series on contract recruitment. I'm super excited about this. I think it's very timely and very relevant right now. And as you can expect from any trending topics episode, this series will cover everything from the philosophical to the practical. So we'll keep our head in the clouds, but our feet on the ground, and we'll cover a little bit of everything. Today, we're going to start by talking about the benefits of contract recruitment, the industry's primed for a model shift, and how technology is a contract recruiter's best friend. So for this series, we will be joined by Reegan Coleman. She's a strategic account manager here at Loxo and a former contract recruiter herself. So she's kind of the best person to have this conversation with. So hi, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Lex. It's really nice to be here. I'm super excited to start digging into more of the contract side of the business here on our pod. It's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. Prior to Loxo, I was actually in contract recruitment myself. I spent about 2 years in the space, specializing in accounting and finance, as well as professional services contract recruitment. So I get the game, I get the world that our recruiters are living in, so I definitely agree that it's a very important conversation to be having. I think it's important for a few reasons, right? So to your point, not to say that contract recruitment is making like a comeback per se, but I think 2025 is going to be a big year for this business model. I'm seeing more and more of our new clients where this is their bread and butter. This is what they are doing all day, every day. And so they came to Loxo to complete their tech stack. And then on the flip side, I'm seeing quite a few of our legacy customers that are wanting to push the needle and expand their reach beyond just perm placements. So I think there's a ton of spaces and niches where this type of work makes so much sense. I think the technology that goes hand in hand with that it's a crucial part of the conversation. So I'm just excited to chat about it.
Yeah, no, I think that this is, like you said, very timely. It's very relevant. And this is something that legacy recruiters and people who are maybe new to this as a career, this is something that they should have on their radar to see like, hey, does this make sense for me to jump into this model and also start thinking about niches, start thinking about industries where this makes sense. So this conversation, again, is the first of a 3-part series. So in this, we're going to kind of just start laying the foundation, talking about contract recruitment at a high level. And then in future episodes, we'll start to drill down a little bit more into some of the nitty gritty. But let's start at the very beginning and have you walk us through a little bit of just, what are the high level benefits of contract recruitment for someone who maybe has never considered this model before or is not really familiar with it? What would you kind of say are those high level benefits?
Yeah. So I think when you talk about benefits, you need to talk about it from both a business and a candidate perspective, because I think there's a lot of positives that go hand in hand with it on the contract or interim recruitment side of it.
Yeah.
So on the business side, I think when you're thinking about agility, this really enables companies to respond quickly to market changes or like new opportunities, right? Without having to disrupt their internal processes. And also not being tied down by the perm process. So this is not me coming at the perm process by any means, but I do think that we can all agree that it's definitely a much longer, more in-depth operation from start to finish.
Yeah.
Whereas contract recruitment, it's more of a speed to fill, speed to hire mentality. So you're spending a lot less time trying to get someone into that position.
And that, in this very, very fast changing world that we're living in, AI has accelerated everything. And so, when we look at that acceleration curve, it's basically a vertical line now. And so what could matter more than speed in this world? So I think, we talk a lot about the concept of agility on this podcast and just how that adaptability and agility, the two A's, are basically the most important things that a recruiter could have in their soft skills set. So I think that, this is very in line with that philosophy for sure.
Definitely. And I think when we're thinking about agility as well, especially in a post-COVID world, thinking about global talent access for like remote specific jobs, contract recruitment could be a great benefit add as well. Companies can then hire contractors from different locations and again, just tap into that broader talent pool without those geographic restrictions. So I think that is really helpful as well.
Yeah, that is definitely something where we're at this shifting point of COVID changed so much about how we work, and now AI is changing so much about how we work. And so we're having these conversations where, many people are returning to the office now, but then there's all these opportunities for those who are willing to be a bit more flexible and a little bit more creative potentially with their working model to find the best talent and bring them in-house, whether that be in a remote capacity or not. So I definitely think, like that flexibility, this still kind of ties in with that agility and that kind of just like willingness to roll with the punches.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also to your point from earlier, there's an entire talent pool of contractors out there ready to be tapped into. Contractors are perfect for short-term or project-based work. So when you think about that project-based efficiency, that's another key thing for contractors. There's specialized contractors because they can be. They've made a career out of it. They've spent years and years of their life doing what they're doing, perfecting what they do, becoming and learning so much about their craft and their niche. So from that perspective, when you bring a contractor in, it's almost more of a consultative approach sometimes from that facet, and it can be an immediate value add with that expertise from jump. Again, without having to disrupt your internal training, internal team processes, you're able to just go, okay, we've got you. You can help us with that situation. So bridging those skill gaps, I think, is crucial to talk about as well.
Yeah, I think that is such an interesting point from like an infrastructure perspective as well. Working with hiring teams to make sure that the infrastructure supports someone coming in and just jumping right into a task. Mm-hmm. And like, what do they need to get up to speed on the culture? How important is that in this role, in this setting, and kind of having that understanding of the ramp time is and should be a lot faster. And so how do we kind of build structure and process around that to make this as smooth as possible? As someone who spent a lot of my career freelancing as a writer, this is something that I've seen time and time again organizations just struggle with. You bring a freelancer, an expert on something in-house, and you are paying them a decent amount of money on an hourly basis, but you spend so many of those hours just kind of having them flounder a little bit and not really knowing how to utilize them as best as you can. So I think that there is this opportunity as well for contract recruiters to have this talent advisory mindset of, hey, I'm going to kind of almost on a consultative basis help you create structure and processes that help onboard these employees better. Because again, as the model and the market shifts, we have this opportunity to hold the hands of our clients and help them walk through this and say, hey, these are some opportunities for you to make this process better, more efficient for you, less expensive for you, and also just a better experience for the candidate themselves.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think that brings up a really good point, because the beautiful thing about contract recruitment is, yes, it can be these predetermined, like, lengths of time, sometimes maybe like 4 to 6 months, maybe a year. Everyone knows what they're signing up for ahead of time, right? But then it can be more of like an open-ended situation, or like a contract to hire situation. And that could be more of like the contractor is actually proving to be the long-term solution for your business. And I think that that is incredible, because you're kind of thinking about their contract as more of like the trial period mentality on both sides. The candidate has the opportunity to understand what they're getting into, understand the people they're working with, the company they're working with, because again, it was a contract trial. But then they would actually be able to sign up and decide, no, this is something that I want to continue doing if presented the opportunity. And the business also gets the ability to save money on not having to onboard, interview, train another person. So I think for, again, both businesses and candidates, when you're thinking about positives and benefits, finding and partnering with a staffing agency could be one of the best decisions you ever make on either side.
Yeah, no, I think that is wildly true. And just, yeah, you said it best. A lot of these freelancers, they're experts. They are doing this because they can, and they're making a really great living off of this. And so there is also this added element of like, okay, bringing someone in and giving them a great experience might be the thing that makes them say, actually, you know what, maybe I could do this full-time thing. Like maybe this is the place where I, settle down and put down roots. So I think that experience side of things becomes really critical in an area where I feel like a lot of times people think of it as less important, because it's like, oh, well, this is just a contract for X amount of time. The onboarding and candidate experience doesn't have to be that great. I could see people kind of shifting into that mindset of almost being like, yeah, whatever, it'll all work out. Mm-hmm. But I think that for those who are willing to think a little bit more, long game, whether it's the candidate in this role specifically or just your relationship with the candidate as a whole in the long term, yes, there's a lot of opportunities to create a better experience and have this, this reputation of excellence that maybe other recruiters aren't offering them.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think when you're thinking about the long-term game on the recruiting side, it's so important to think of. I was talking with one of my clients the other day, and they were like, my candidates are my future clients. And so having that mindset is just so powerful, because you never know who you're going to talk to, and you never know where they're going to go and what other doors that could open for you. So again, just positive and benefits on all sides of this business.
Yeah, no, I love it. Okay, any other benefits that you want to touch on before we move into the next phase of the conversation?
Yes, I think speaking of staffing agencies, one benefit that they can also offer is like lower overhead costs for businesses. Because contractors are often, working through a staffing agency, or sometimes they're more of the independent basis. This can, one, reduce costs, but also it takes that administrative burden off of the company, because, the benefits, the training, the pensions, that's not stuff that the employer needs to worry about. That's actually burdens that the staffing agency is taking on from like a compliance and payroll management perspective. So that tax, that payroll, that legal compliance, that's not things that you necessarily need to worry about. The staffing agency is doing that for you. So again, it's just kind of a win-win overall.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so let's move into industries or niches where this model may make more sense than others. Mm-hmm. Obviously this is something that there are maybe like a couple of industries that instantly come to mind where we're very familiar with the concept of freelance talent, of contract talent. This is not new, but there are other industries where it feels like this would be a bigger leap. So I'm just curious for your thoughts on, like what are the industries or niches that are most well poised for this transition to happen? And like, where are those opportunities for recruiters who want to kind of start moving in this direction?
Yeah, I think I have like 5 or 6 in mind. Doesn't mean that it has to be limited to these, right? But I think these industries are the most primed for this kind of work due to the nature of their business. So when you think about contract recruitment and areas that might be the best, you want to think about, okay, who's going to have peak or busy seasons? Who might have more hiring surges? Who might need more project-based work? And so 2 of those industries I kind of already touched on because I had worked in them previously. So accounting and finance, and then also professional services, customer service, that mentality. Those are 2 areas where you're always going to need people because inherently there are busy seasons for both. When you think of accounting and finance, you think tax season, right? Automatically. And so you're going to need people during those peak seasons of the year. And then when it comes to customer service, you could take that of like the HR side, right? Where it's HR and recruiters. So during hiring surges, you really need people. And then also from the like call center perspective, that's something you can think about as well. You're always going to need customer service reps. You're always going to need insurance call center reps, right? Especially during like open enrollment, annual enrollment. So I think it's just tapping into things of like, it might not necessarily be year-round model, but that's not necessarily the point. Like you don't need it to be year round. You just need to think strategically about the times where it would make the most sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So when it comes to something like that, I'm curious, like what is the recommendation as far as, you talked about speed to hire. If you know that you're going to have a hiring surge or a big need in October, when should you start laying the groundwork for that and begin that process when you're working with contract talent?
On the recruiting side or on the business side?
Both. Let's do both.
Okay, cool. I think, so on the business side, respectfully to businesses out there, you should give your recruiters more of a runway.
Okay.
But that's also just kind of the nature of the game, right?
Yeah.
You're like, hey, I need these 2 people by tomorrow. Can you get them?
Yesterday.
And as literally yesterday, yeah. And the contract recruiter's like, all right, you got it. On a recruiting basis, you should be consistently having conversations. I think the most successful contract recruiters that I've come across in my experience have been those that are reactive rather than passive. And so I guess proactive is maybe even a better way to say it, right?
Yeah.
Where you're constantly reaching out to people and just trying to have conversations and put them into your pipeline. And I think that's also where candidate organization comes into play, and we can talk about that a little bit more in a couple minutes, but just being really organized and having conversations, because again, you'd never know what doors you're going to open. Like, sure, you can put out a bunch of ads on Indeed and have people come in and review resumes, but you're already at a disadvantage, whereas other recruiters are going to be like, yeah, I can call Steve tomorrow and he'll be there. So it's just that proactive mentality of you should be having conversations for roles that you don't even know you're going to have today.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point and to the point of just kind of playing the long game too, it's like if you're within a certain niche, you're working within a certain industry, and you build up a great database of people that you have relationships with, this is something where, yeah, a role comes along and you already have the right person in mind. You've already built your short list of people that you've worked with in the past who have a proven success record that you feel very confident in and can kind of, vouch for in a sense. And I think that that's an interesting element of contract recruitment as well, is like you could theoretically be placing the same candidate multiple times over the course of a not so extended timeline. Whereas, you don't see that in other models as frequently, hopefully. Hopefully that person is finding, a good long-term fit where you place them. But in this case, it's like success looks a lot different just based off of the built-in short timelines.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like whenever we're talking about permanent, like direct hire recruitment, networking. But I feel like it's almost even more true in contract recruitment sometimes, because to your point, you want to be able to have someone come back to you and you want to be able to place them 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And I think also some of the most admirable recruiters that I can think of are the ones that they're thinking about where they can place their recruiter before their contract has even ended, right?
Yeah.
Checking in constantly, being like, hey, how's it going? When do you end? Like, what do we want to do? What are our next steps? Here's what I have open, or here's what I'm going to try to work on for you. And so I think that's really powerful as well.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, hit us with some other industries that make sense.
Yeah, technology I think is a big one, right? Like technology is here to stay. She moved in years ago. She's not going anywhere. And developing tech is always just going to prove a need for a specialist or like temporary projects. So I think that's a big one. Same with healthcare, right? Think travel nurses, think Doctors Without Borders, think medical secretaries and admins. Like you cannot live without them. And so very, very important. And also big pharma for clinical trials has been really important too
Oh,
previously as
interesting.
well. Yeah. So tech and healthcare, two big ones. And then I think some of the lesser known ones, or not lesser known, but lesser thought of, would be engineering and construction, and then manufacturing and supply chain. Engineering and construction projects or engineering projects typically have like a set start and end time. Obviously delays are a thing, but like it's the thought that counts. And
My
so
husband is a project manager for a general contractor, so I know all about loose timelines, but
yeah.
needing to know like, hey, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. We need X amount of people in Y location by this date, and it's, you're constantly juggling all of that. So, yeah, I wouldn't have thought of this, but this makes so much sense that this would be an area ripe for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, like you also have to take seasons and weather into account. So like that's a variable that could change a lot of different things as well. And then yeah, manufacturing and supply chain, I think that stems back to like peak or busy seasons as well. So peak holidays, Christmas, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you need additional support in your warehouse operations and with your supply chain analysts, just to name a few. And so I think that is an industry that could definitely be tapped into as well.
I love it. Okay, so we've danced around the topic of technology throughout this conversation. And so I'm curious for your thoughts on why tech is so important, especially when it comes to contract recruitment. Like, why does having the right technology matter? What kind of a difference can that make in your process and just your peace of mind, perhaps even as a contract recruiter? Tech, like you said, she moved in, she's not leaving. This is something that, we talk about a lot. Obviously, we are a recruitment tech company, so it had to happen at some point. We had to talk about this. I promise we will not make this entire segment a plug for Loxo, but Loxo is an amazing product, so we might talk about functionality within the product at various points. But yeah, walk me through that. I'm curious for your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think this just stems back to what we were talking about earlier. The speed to fill nature of this business is crucial. Like competing, like when you're talking about filling contract roles, you're not only competing with your internal team, right? But you're also competing with other staffing agencies. Contract jobs are rarely exclusive the way that perm jobs are. So it's not like they're coming to you and they're like, hey, I need you to fill these 20 positions for me. No. They are reaching out to 3, 4, 5 different staffing agencies, and their mind is just like, hey, how quickly can we get these filled? So making sure that you have a tech stack or a platform that is able to allow you to do the speed to fill, not have to worry about the admin, and have really good candidate organization. I think those are very key themes.
And to that point, when thinking through that competitive nature and almost on the biz dev side of things, having the data around time to fill, like around those speed metrics and how efficient your process is, that's a selling point that you can bring into those sales conversations as you're pitching. This is something that I can offer. And I think that having more of that data and being able to like double click into those things and say, we need to improve this metric. What are those like waterfall metrics that lead into this one? That is so important, and something that technology has given us access to those insights in a way that we were kind of blind to, even 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think one of the things that I talk about a lot with my clients specifically that are contract focused is the administrative functions just feels so like you feel bogged down by it. And so I think on the recruiter side, it's like, I'm moving too fast. I don't have time to log all of this stuff. Like, I would rather just get on the phone and talk to someone. But then the people leaders are like, well, hey, we need these reports. So we need you to log your metrics, right? So I think, and again, humble Loxo plug, like the talent intelligence workflow allows you to log an activity and have 2, 3, 4 things done for you already. So your people leaders are happy with their metrics, and your candidates are getting moved automatically through the pipeline for you.
Yeah.
So from that administrative piece, you're not feeling suffocated. You're feeling like, oh, okay, I'm on top of this. I can do it.
No, and I think that it's such a simple thing, thinking through workflow automations and even just thinking through like ease of moving through that process. It sounds so simple, but like having intuitive technology, you really can't put a price tag on that because we all know how annoying and frustrating it is when your technology that's supposed to make your job easier actually ends up just being something that you have to manage and something that causes way more just friction. And so I think like this is not something to undersell. Like find a process that works for you and tech that supports that process and that workflow. And then, refine and perfect from there. But that is a very critical piece of making sure that you are operating as efficiently as you can. And like we've said this time and time again, efficiency does matter. It's not just a buzzword. It is something that you can, one, track, and two, improve over time. And you should be making that a core function of your business operations at this point in time.
Absolutely. I think while talking about efficiency from a sourcing perspective, you don't want your candidate talent pool to just feel like a wasteland as well. Like you need to have organization within your CRM to make sure that you are like, you're able to track down your people as soon as you need them. So I think within Loxo, there's quite a few different ways that you can do it, right? We have different candidate tagging for filtering. We have different statuses that you can use based off of however you want to organize it. I just think based off of your preferences, it's much easier to quickly grab and just like throw them into the job and keep running with them. So yeah, I think taking a look at who you have already is the first place to start. But if you can't sort through who you have already, like you're going to get beat out every time.
Yeah, and I think that, that's always important, but I can see how that is even more important when you're working in this contract model where, finding the right people as fast as possible and being able to leverage people who are already in your database, people that you've already built a relationship with, and find those people very quickly. That becomes so, so important. It's such a differentiator. Like you can use the quality of your database as a differentiator when you are doing business development. Again, these are the toggle between like doing your actual role and then thinking ahead to like securing new business. We talk a lot about that on the podcast, especially in the past 2 years. This has become such a hot topic. And it's something that if your workflow is as solid and efficient as it can be, that biz dev side becomes really easy actually, because it's so intuitive. It's like, hey, look, I've got this process and it's amazing. And it becomes your competitive advantage.
Yeah, I agree. It really does.
Okay, so talking about tech, we have to bring up the elephant in the room, which is AI. You talked a little bit about automations, but I'm curious for one, tech platforms that are incorporating AI, again, Loxo, ding, 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 but also just like how within contract recruitment specifically does this become really relevant?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about sourcing, obviously we already talked about candidate organization, right? So outside of your own internal database, what are we doing with external databases? And I think when we think about AI, we think about Loxo Source and we think about AI matching and how powerful that can be to tap in. I think one of the things that our product does so well is expand the level of results that you might necessarily see on other platforms with the use of AI. And I think from a contract perspective, oftentimes, yes, you have your specialized people that you can absolutely put into a role and into their niche super easily. But then on the flip side, you have other roles where they might just be looking for someone that can do the job. It doesn't necessarily mean their skill set has to be 100%. That's what they've always done. So I think thinking outside of the box and having a tool that can bring back people it's a game changer. I use this example with my customers all the time. Before Loxo, I was a recruiter, but I had all of the transferable skills of a strategic account manager.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't using Loxo Source and the AI expansion, I wouldn't come up in a search for that, right? Because you're looking for specifically CSMs or SAMs, but I could still do the role. So I think from that perspective, the AI can really push the reach and allow you to tap into even more of that talent pool than you might not have already had access to.
Yeah, I think that is such a great point when it comes to sourcing in general. This is something that thinking outside or sourcing outside of the box it becomes so critical, especially, in the past 5 years, we've seen so many people making these major career shifts, and soft skills are leading that movement. And I think that this is something that we know is happening, but it's slept on from a strategy perspective because it's long been this thing that's like, it's a bit nebulous. It's like, okay, I like this in theory, but how do I put this into practice? And so I think that level of, intelligent sourcing starts to bring some of that into the mix here, where you can kind of walk that line of soft skills and skills-based hiring, but bringing some data into the mix there too. So you've got that balance. So I'm totally with you. All right. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up part 1 of our 3-part series on contract recruitment?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was actually reading an article the other day about skills-based hiring. So I just, to your point, like that is going to be something that we are continuing to see evolve in just the recruitment industry and just hiring practices in general, for sure. But no, I think I'm just really excited to continue digging more into like the candidate side of contract recruitment at some point. And then also just like the ins and outs of more of like the biz dev, because I feel like we've been kind of touching on that a little bit so far. But yeah, I hope this was a fun intro to contract recruitment. I've really enjoyed having the ability to chat through some of this stuff.
Same. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and excited to, like you said, we've been putting out breadcrumbs that we will come back to in future conversations. So for all of you who are listening, if this is sounding interesting to you, be sure to follow along, because we will be coming back to all of this and kind of digging a little bit deeper into this model. So as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you liked this episode and are not sure where to go next, we do have a link to a similar episode in the show notes. So especially once we start continuing on with this series, we will make sure that you can easily access the preceding episodes and get the full series all in one place. You can find the show notes in the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as on our website, loxo.co/podcast. Full episodes are always available on YouTube as well if you're more of a visual person and you want to see our beautiful faces as we're talking to you about contract recruitment. If you have specific questions or are looking for advice, you can always send us an email at podcast@loxo.co. This is something that I love when we receive feedback, questions, just further insights on a topic that we're diving into. This is an inbox that's monitored by us, truly real people, and we are excited to hear from you guys, especially on a topic that is, relatively new and very topical. Let's get a conversation going. Reach out to us and we will be able to dive in and continue digging into that stuff in the future episodes of this series. So if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to leave us a quick rating in your podcast streaming platform. It only takes 3 seconds, I promise, and it will help other recruiters like you find us. Okay, that's it. That's the show. Until next time, have a great day.